The Volkswagen T-Cross is the newest and smallest member of Volkswagen's growing family of SUVs, and it comes into a part of the market that's already got quite a lot of choice in it. Between cars as different as the Dacia Duster and the Nissan Juke, it's up against rivals that are both bigger and smaller. More expensive ones, premium branded ones, cheaper ones, funky looking ones and chunky looking ones. And then there are some cars that have proper four-wheel drive and they're surprisingly good off-road, and others that just aren't. Amongst that lot, you might say there's no such thing as an average compact crossover hatchback, one that does a little bit of everything but does it well. And for a company like Volkswagen, that sounds like an opportunity. So, for the better part of a decade now, believe it or not, Volkswagen has just sat back and watched as its various rivals have made hay in this particular part of the car market. But even if you're the biggest car maker in the world, if you want to make money out of small cars at the moment, you have to make this sort of small car. The T-Cross shares its platform with the Volkswagen Polo, as you will doubtless not be surprised to hear, as well as the Seat Arona and the forthcoming Skoda Kamiq. It's also shorter than the Seat, a little bit, and also shorter than most of its crossover class rivals. Many of them, you might say, not being particularly compact at all. But despite being maybe a bit smaller than the average crossover, this is actually a really well packaged car. There's room enough for 4 grown adult people inside it, and you get sliding back seats as standard, so the boot expands all the way up beyond 450 litres when you need it to, which is pretty big for the class. There's also a split level boot floor in the back there as well, but on this one you can't use the lower setting because there's the obligatory high-spec subwoofer under the floor, which sounds a bit like this. There we go. So this isn't one of those sort of extra rugged, capable off-roady crossovers, maybe like the Jeep Renegade. It's front-wheel drive only. I can't tell you what the ground clearance is because Volkswagen doesn't quote it, but I bet it's not particularly great. And at the moment there are only 2 engines, the more powerful of which, as far as the UK market is concerned, is the 113 horsepower 3-cylinder 1 litre in this car. There'll be a 1.5 TSI Evo along later with 148 horsepower if you want to wait for that. For gearboxes, you can choose between manual or 7-speed twin-clutch DSG auto, and actually I suspect plenty of people will go for the auto just because it's a bit easier to drive, and I expect that'll make a difference in a car like this. And also it does slightly better CO2 and economy numbers than the manual. It's a good comfy car this, you know, I've got plenty of room for knees and elbows, the cabin feels wide, the driving position's good, and there's plenty of room behind me. You wouldn't necessarily say that about all the cars this is up against. And there is a sense of quality about it, undoubtedly, although perhaps not the same sense you might get in bigger Volkswagens because of all these slightly shiny, hard mouldings about the place. Do people care about hard mouldings? I don't know. They're far from inoffensive. I mean, they're what cars at this price tend to have. We just expect better from Volkswagen, and maybe we shouldn't. So this is an upper-level SEL trim car. Most cars in the UK will probably be SEs, I suspect, but even on one of those, as standard, you get a touchscreen infotainment setup with CarNet connectivity stuff. You get radar cruise control. You get 4 USB holes, standard, and then you can pay extra for the Discover Pro navigation system, which this is, for the Active Info digital display, which is very whizzy, and for things like a reversing camera. If you want a bit more colour about the interior, you can also pay extra for a design pack, which this car has got. I think it's 620 quid or something like that, and you get the orange wheels, the orange mirrors, these sort of 2-tone orangey seats, and this black and orange dashboard foil, which is particularly colourful. I think they call it energetic orange. Very apt. As you can probably hear, there's not a great deal else that's energetic about this T-Cross, but that's part of the appeal of the car to me. It's a sort of a serious grown-up Volkswagen among funky but perhaps slightly embarrassing, a bit frivolous cars, mentioning no names. So the 1 litre engine isn't particularly keen to rev. It's not like Ford's EcoBoost, but it's got plenty of usable torque, and it's refined, and it's pleasant, and it will knock out sort of getting on for 50 to the gallon when you want it to. And I expect plenty of T-Cross owners probably will want it to, let's say on the way from the supermarket to the garden centre. I imagine, getting 50 to the gallon will please them. I can't imagine they'll find themselves on the far side of 4,000 RPM too often, so it's probably fair enough. The ride and handling very much fits the sort of classic Volkswagen character type as well. It's measured, it's grown up, it's rounded, it's polished. Yeah, the car steers really nicely, intuitively. It's not too light, it's not too darty. The handling's tidy but assured. Basically, the car handles like it's small, but it rides like a much bigger car, and that's the whole appeal of it, really. It's not contrived, it feels natural, it doesn't sort of feign sportiness, it doesn't put on some sort of dynamic caricature just for the sake of the added selling point. It doesn't need to do that. Some cars in this class, maybe a little bit guilty of that. Again, mentioning no names. As you might have gathered, I'm maybe not the world's biggest fan of compact crossovers in general, but there is undoubtedly a substance and a seriousness about this one that I could get behind. It's a shame that the perceived quality level isn't quite up to sort of full-size hatchback standards. Well, I know a lot of people do like the idea of giving up a regular hatchback for a car like this because you get the higher seating position, it's easier to get in and out of, it's a bit more versatile, it's easier to park because it's smaller, because it's higher off the ground, you don't bash the bumpers on curbstones, etc. Yeah, I get all of that. I'm just not sure everybody who's done it over the last few years hasn't had a little bit of cause for regret, because some cars like this just don't have the practicality that they ought to. The T-Cross is different. I think if you gave up a hatchback for this, you'd have very little reason to complain about it. And if you were going to do it, this is probably the car I'd tell you to buy.